Surprise, surprise, surprise. It's me, Gomer. Do you remember when Sergeant Carter used to ask me if I loved him? Well, I used to say, I like you, but I don't love you. So today we're going to talk about love. Oh, excuse me. Today we're going to talk about love as referenced in our gospel lesson. I couldn't help starting off with Gomer Pyle, since we are also going to talk about neighbors. No, not Jim Neighbors, but Neighbors, neighbors. So, as we always do, let's put today's gospel lesson in context. Jesus had just put some Sadducees in their place. The Sadducees, you see, were the wealthy aristocrats who opposed the oral law of the Pharisees and sought only to preserve the law of the Pentateuch. You know, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, also called the Torah. Well, they were materialistic in their outlook, and they did not believe in life after death. You know, I think maybe that's why they were sad, you see. Karen didn't get it either. Since they did not believe in life after death, the Sadducees tried to trap Jesus with a question about marriage in heaven. You know the story about the woman who had been legally married to 7 brothers in succession after each brother died childless. Jesus turned their lack of understanding back on them. They knew the law, but failed to understand the power of God to raise the dead. They also failed to understand that God designed marriage for companionship and perpetuation of the human race on earth. Believers will experience the perfect spiritual relationships with everyone else, and in that way will be like angels. Jesus dispatched the conversation with these words: He is not the God of the dead, but of the living. You are badly mistaken. Now we pick up our gospel lesson with one of the teachers of the law came and heard them debating. Teachers of the law are what we also know as scribes. In New Testament times, they interpreted the law. They taught it to the disciples of the Pharisees and were experts in cases where people were accused of breaking the law of Moses. Luke 19:47 tells us that they were among the leaders in plotting to kill Jesus. So this was no idle bystander putting in his 2 cents. This was an expert in the law. Now, I'm not talking about just the 10 Commandments either, but all 613 laws included in the Mishnah. Now, those who know me and those who attend the Thursday night Bible study realize that I sometimes chase down rabbit holes. That means when I get interested in a subject, I dig deeper and deeper into the minutiae of details till sometimes I forget where I started. Well, the scribes and the rabbis of Jesus' time did that too. As they interpreted and recorded the laws, they divided them into main groups called the Halakha and the Haggadah. The laws in the Halakha were the most binding and therefore more important than the Haggadah. The laws in the Halakha were further divided into subcategories, some more important or greater than others. This ranking of the commands was the subject of extensive research, discussion, and arguments among the scribes and rabbis. So, the scribe in our gospel has intentionally plunging Jesus in the middle of an ongoing controversy when he asked a question that even the most educated theologians of the day was unable to answer. He asked of all the commandments, which is the most important? Well, the scribe obviously recognized Jesus gave a wise answer to the Sadducees' question about marriage in heaven. However, he was a scribe and a Pharisee. So he understood that the lack of understanding and belief of the Sadducees made them bush league compared to a scribe. So he's saying, okay, Jesus, you're in the big leagues now. Of all the commandments, which is the most important? The most important one, answered Jesus, is this: Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord our God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. The second is this: love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. Jesus responded with words that were second nature to every Jew. The beginning words of the Shema. The Shema, as we noted in the children's sermon, was recited in its entirety every morning and evening by all pious Jews. By using God's own words from the Pentateuch, Jesus is indicating the orthodox nature of his theology. He then went on to include words from Leviticus 19, verse 18, love your neighbor as yourself, indicating that genuine love for God is followed closely in importance by genuine love for other people. There are a few words in this, the Greatest Commandment, that deserve a closer look. First, of course, is love. Now, I might say, I love coffee. Nowadays, coffee lovers have a whole new vocabulary of words for coffee. You can order a latte, a cafe au lait, a cappuccino, an Americano, a macchiato, or an espresso, or a whole bunch of other ones. Well, I have lots of words for coffee, but I really don't have a very good selection of words to describe how I feel about coffee. When I said I love coffee, you understood from the context what I meant. You know that I enjoy drinking coffee. I really like it. I look forward to my first cup in the morning. But that definition of love is inadequate when I say I love my wife, I love my children, I love God. You've probably heard me say the language of love for God is obedience. That's how we show our love for God. Here's a worldly example. When I was young, I was a pretty good kid. I loved my parents, and I really tried not to disappoint them. By and large, I obeyed their rules because I loved them and I cared about their feelings. Now, I'm a grown man. And when I'm driving my car, I, by and large, obey the rules of the road because I love the police and I don't want to disappoint them. No. By and large, I obey the rules of the road because I don't want a ticket and I don't want to be in an accident. Because I love myself and I care what happens to me. You know, I just used the word love to describe feelings towards coffee, my wife, my children, God, my parents, and myself. All the same word. Now, I don't know how many Greek words there are for coffee, but I know there are at least 6 Greek words for love. Eros, erotic love. Storge, love between parents and children. Pragma, love between 2 people in a lengthy marriage. Philautia, love of oneself. And the last 2, philia and agape, which are the most frequent words found in the Bible about love. Philia is tender affection, as in Philadelphia, which literally means brotherly love. Or the Greek philanthropia, which is a combination of philia, tender affection, and anthropos, the Greek word for man, which forms our word philanthropy, which literally means tender affection for mankind, or kindness. The short definition of agape love is the love of God for man and of man for God. It expresses the deep and consistent love and interest of God towards entirely unworthy recipients, producing and fostering a reverential love in the recipients towards God. Agape love further instills a reciprocal, practical love towards fellow believers who are also partakers of God's agape love. And it instills the desire to help others seek a relationship with God. It is significant to note that in the Bible, these 2 terms, agape and philia, are never interchanged. They clearly have 2 separate meanings, even though we translate them both as love. So in our gospel reading, the Shema, the word love is the verb form of agape, agapaho. Love, agapaho, the Lord your God with all your heart. The heart denotes the center of all physical and spiritual life. And with all your soul, our moral being, which was constituted as Jesus laid the foundation of heaven and earth and is designed for everlasting life. And with all your mind, all our thoughts and understanding should be focused on God. And with all our strength, that's the awesome power that is ours in the name of Jesus. In other words, we should love God as He loves us. He loves us with His limitless heart, soul, mind, and strength. And of course, the second commandment is love your neighbor as yourself. Neighbor, the Greek plasion. According to Christ, a neighbor is any other person, irrespective of nation or religion, with whom we live or we happen to meet. So which love are we to extend to our neighbor? You got it. Agape love. The love that God extends to us even though we are entirely unworthy recipients. There's no escaping the importance of this. The second part of the greatest commandment, love your neighbor as yourself. So how do we love ourselves, God, and others with agape love and avoid self-centered philautia, love of oneself? Remember, we said the way we express our love for God, our agape love, is obedience. We obey God's commands because we love God, not to earn His love. Our good works are a sign of our salvation, not a path to salvation. So how does that apply to loving one's self? Well, don't we have expectations for ourselves? Standards that we try to hold so that we may live our lives in a way that's pleasing to God? We do this because God loved us first. When we fail, don't we chastise ourselves and ask God to forgive us? Do we really demand more of anyone else than we demand of ourselves? If you're like me, sometimes I really don't like myself very much. At those times I rely on the mercy of God and His perfect agape love to make me right again. Doesn't loving others as ourselves involve some expectations as well? Aren't there standards of human decency we can accept as a universal code of moral responsibility? By and large, the civil laws of nations around the world agree with the core of the Judeo-Christian moral law. Don't murder, don't steal, don't cheat, don't lie. Let's look at a simple application when the word neighbor literally refers to the people we live close to. I love my neighbors. I'm happy to spend time with any of them. I want their happiness and welfare, and if I can help them in any way, it's my pleasure. When I go to their homes, I knock on the door. When they come to visit us, they knock on our door. I treat them exactly as I expect them to treat me. How simple is that? We learned it in grade school. We called it the Golden Rule. It's scriptural. It's based on Matthew 7, verse 12. So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. For this, and this is important, for this sums up the law and the prophets. Sound familiar? Matthew 22, verse 39 and 40. And the second is like this. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. Romans 13, 9 and 10. Whatever other commands there may be are summed up in this one command. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no harm to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. In closing, I will mention one more illustration. A week ago, we all shuddered. Yesterday, we all shuddered when we heard about a terrible shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. The shooter was wounded and sent to Allegheny General Hospital. As he continued to spew his rhetoric of anti-Semitic hate, a Jewish nurse attended to his medical needs. As he continued his ranting, a Jewish doctor prepared for surgery to save his life. On the next day, the president of the hospital, a Jew who lives diagonal from the synagogue and whose family attends the synagogue, visited the shooter. He asked him only one question. Are you being treated well? That's how you love your neighbor. Amen.